Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Snap Material Podcast. That's right. We're coming back at you here. It's August of 2023, and we're going to get you ready for the upcoming season, and we're going to talk a little bit about the previous season. I think that's where we're going to start, is talking about the previous season. I am your host, Jesse Starcher, and of course with me this evening is Evan Bevins. Evan, we just got through with Rise of the Phoenix. Actually, no, we're still in the process of that. It doesn't end until the beginning of next week as far as we're recording.
Limping across the finish line.
Yeah, right. The upcoming season is going to be upon us here next week, so that will be interesting. But yeah, we've pretty much experienced all of Rise of the Phoenix, which started July 3rd of 2023. So here we'll talk about what the season was like, and we'll also, all right, maybe we'll talk about what we unlocked during the season, or our cards that we acquired. You know, we kind of did this before. Usually we do a preview of the season, then we kind of do a review of the season, because we're all excited about the cards that are going to be hitting, and then afterwards we're going to find out what our experience was if we ran into any of those cards that were out there that got released during the season. So we will start with the Phoenix Force, which was the premier card for last season. Felt like a year. It was a long season. It was a long season, actually. I mean, there was 5 cards that released total, and the first one, like I said, being Phoenix Force, which was It
started out as a 5/6, but in one of the updates, they dropped it to a 4/5.
Oh, that's right. They did
because people weren't using it very much.
Good point. I remember that being like one of the first times that they had really nerfed a card, if you want to call it nerfing. I mean, it really brought a card down shortly after being dropped. So anyway, it is now a 4/5, and on reveal, revive one of your destroyed cards and merge with it, and that card can move each turn. I think my biggest criticism last time was that if it was a 5/6, like, you would bring it out on turn 5 and maybe be able to move it in one turn, unless you had Magic out there. But
which would be hard to do, since you couldn't use her until recently before turn 5.
Right, exactly. So this actually does help a lot. Them dropping it down to a 4/5 gives it the opportunity to get out there and bring back a destroyed card.
Usually multiple man.
Yes. Yeah, that was my note. I can see as well you've experienced the multiple man combo. I think that was the first time when I realized, okay, this could be a threat, because you bring, if multiple man gets destroyed, then Phoenix Force brings it back, adds the 5 to it, the 5 power to it, and now all of a sudden, what is multiple man, a 2/3?
Yeah. So you'd be an 8, and you can drop an 8 and pick up
move them anywhere. So. Yeah, you just move them anywhere you want. So you got 2 turns. You can drop an 8 there. Okay, I'll move over here. There's an 8, and I'm going to move him over here. There's an 8. Spreads out this massive power pretty well before turn 6 hits. But
I think I had somebody come up with, I mean, maybe even 3 or 4 of them in one game, but that was like the only time it really made much of. I mean, I'm sure it may have made a difference here and there, but it wasn't something that I was seeing a lot or losing to a lot or anything like that. Nimrod, I remember when Nimrod came out, he was immediately part of Destroyed X, and he's still part of Destroyed X, and I still don't have him, but I never saw Phoenix Force as frequently as Nimrod. I mean, now he's easier to get, sure, but I mean, even compared to when he was the exclusive card, Phoenix Force never approached that level.
Yeah.
It's a card that's playable, but doesn't, shift the whole game, so.
Exactly. All right, next up was Jean Grey, who was a 3-cost, 3-power card, and her ability was ongoing. Players must play their first card here each turn, if possible. Now, a friend of mine, he criticized this card pretty heavily. He pretty much said that he's like, this is a piece of junk card. He says you throw it out there, and it's essentially a race to fill it up. You're stuck there. The opponent's stuck there. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, well, he does kind of have a point, because it kind of sucks. You can't play anywhere else. Your opponent can't play anywhere else. But then I had learned of a strategy. Basically, get it filled up with little cards and then start moving cards that your opponent was playing there. So if you could Polaris a card, or if you could somehow Stegron it, Juggernaut it, somehow get it to where that person, after you fill it up, still has like 2 slots that they need to play. I put Negasonic Teenage Warhead down here because that'd still clean up a spot for you and a spot for them. So that's kind of offsets each other anyway. But regardless, that was about the first time where I was like, okay, well, Jean Grey would definitely be helpful if you can fill it up with 1-cost cards pretty easily, especially getting like Sunspot in there.
Yeah.
And then keeping those other cards at bay. But
I think I played somebody in Conquest that used Brood with her a lot. Play her and then fill it up.
Oh, smart. Okay. Yeah. So right then you've got it filled. The other person's just sitting there stuck on that until it's filled up. So it's got its advantages. Now, as for running into it very much, I think I saw her a few times and I was just like, okay, whatever. I mean, that person was not using that strategy as far as I could tell.
Yeah, I didn't see it a whole lot. I know I sent you that one that was like, why won't it let me play a card here? And it was a Jean Grey variant that I didn't recognize. And she was wearing a mask. It was the Marvel Girl costume. But again, it's kind of like Phoenix. It's interesting to try, but it doesn't. You didn't see everybody flock to start using that all of a sudden. I mean, that's what a lot of the cards should be. I think ideally it is useful, but not so much that everybody starts making the same decks.
I agree. I do agree. I don't like cards that overly affect, or I should say overly shape the metagame that's out there. I want to face somebody, and then I don't want to face a deck like that again for another 4 or 5 decks.
Yeah.
Well, then we have Echo, who was a 1-cost 2-power card. After your opponent plays an ongoing card here, remove its abilities. And yes, I did have it happen to me where I had Cosmo laid down at the same time Echo was down there. And I was like, oh, geez. So
at least you're not playing it after Echo's been out there. I'm sure I did that a couple times.
Yeah, not realizing what was going on or what was going to happen. Right. I think that might have happened to me once with Armor. I laid Armor out there. Echo was laying there. And I'm like, oh. Now that I think about it, I believe Echo was called in by Shanna the She-Devil. So somebody played that on the opposite side of me, and then out popped Echo, and I'm like, okay, this game's over. I'm already aggravated. It didn't seem like it affected me too much. Didn't run into it very often, so can't really say that I hated it. Did I want the card? I really don't know if I wanted the card. I remember us talking last time about the insurance for for Wong and. Again, that wasn't something that I had seen. I didn't see people employing that strategy against me, but I don't know if you did or not. But what was your experience?
I ended up buying it because that was the one out of all the cards that I thought would be the most useful. I wanted Jean Grey just, for the whole original X-Men thing, classic costume and whatnot. But she was featured in the first Spotlight caches, and that was about the time they dialed back the tokens. So I still haven't gotten back to 3,000.
Yeah.
But I reasoned, well, okay, Echo, I think is going to be more useful than Jean Grey, and I think she is. I think she's easier to use, but she's not quite the difference maker I envisioned. Reminds me of Ghost. I was like, I got to get Ghost, and everything's going to be awesome. I almost never use Ghost, and then I put Ghost in a deck, and I'm like, hey, maybe that'll work this time, and then eventually I'm like, why am I using Ghost? So, and yeah, the insurance thing, that was my initial thought with her. I don't know that I ever actually did that. Of course, I'm not the greatest at planning ahead, which is something that might be useful in this game. But, a lot of times she comes up early and it's like, well, do you want to hold on to her? So I'm just like, well, let's put her here and see what happens.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, she's got little downside. I always, it's like at worst you're playing Misty Knight.
Yeah.
So, it's low risk and a decent potential reward. It's like having M'Baku and he actually shows up in your hand. Well, you just throw him out there for 2 points. You could do worse.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I got her for 6,000, and yeah, I use her a lot just because, once I'm getting down to, those 1-cost cards, it's, if there's nothing specific to the deck, then it's like, well, could mess somebody up. So,
all right. Well, let's talk about Mirage. Mirage cost 2. and she had a power of 2. On reveal, copy the lowest card in your opponent's hand into your hand and give it +2 power. And my note was, meh, just released this past week, and I can't say that it's been too scary. It's not been something that made me go, oh man, not Mirage. When Mirage gets played, what goes through my head is I immediately look at my cards and I'm like, what is the lowest power card? Because now I've got to worry about whatever that is. And as long as it isn't Spider-Ham, which likely it is, then hopefully I'm playing Spider-Ham on turn 2. But anyway, that's really kind of all. The only card I kind of worry about. Any other 2-cost card that I have in my hand, I could care less. Unless, I don't know, maybe it's Luke Cage I have a problem with.
Now, I'm trying to remember one of my, I had a bunch of higher cost cards, so she got a 3-cost card from me once. I forget what it was. So yeah, every once in a while I'm like, oh crap, what'd they get? But I mean, it's not, again, it's useful, but not disruptive.
I assume if you were going to strategize, you hold on to it late and hope that the person has a higher cost card in their hand and it only costs you 2 to lay it out.
I might be able to hit 3,000 before she goes out. Of course, she'll be in the shop eventually for 3,000 as well. But I don't think she's bad. She's definitely not going to replace Luke Cage in my deck, unless it's for a specific deck, like what I'm now calling the Collectasaur deck.
Collectasaur.
Yeah.
Okay.
Collector and Devil Dinosaur.
Yeah.
I stumbled on, which a lot of people have probably already been reading for ages, but some of the really data-driven stuff on Snapzone, and it just made my head hurt. And all these different names they have for decks that I didn't even understand. So I'm gonna start Collectasaur.
I love it.
I mean, that's just another one that gives you an extra card in your hand. Would work well with Quinjet, Collector, Devil Dinosaur. But outside of that, if she doesn't fit in with the overall strategy, I'm going to use Luke Cage, Spider-Ham, Psylocke, Forge. All those 2-cost cards are going to be on my list before I would get to Mirage.
All right, well, next up and finally, I think one of my favorite cards that I've had a chance to play with in this game was Legion. 5-cost, 8-power card. On reveal, replace each other location with this one. Listen, if you heard the last show, you heard me gush about what I like to do with locations. I love using Quake, and of course what we found out was there's no sense in having Quake in there anymore unless you wanted to try and trick them for some reason. But really, Quake,
or just irritate them twice.
True.
I got to thinking about that later. It's like you could, you could mess with them once and then mess with them again.
That's true. Okay, so Legion shows up, and I was like, well, it's going to be a 6,000 cost card. I don't know if I want to have the tokens for it. And it turns out it's 3,000, and I had just enough. And I thought about it for a quick second, and I immediately pulled the trigger and bought Legion. I mean, really, a 5/8 is nothing to sneeze at. I'm really surprised this was only 3,000 tokens. And
yeah,
it does have a pretty big game-changing ability. When, just for example, I had one game I was playing, and I had Luke Cage in my deck. Laid out Luke Cage in one of the locations, brought the power down of each of your cards. Mm-hmm. So had Luke Cage out there, and turn 6, I laid out Legion on that negative zone, and it went all across the board and zapped a ton of his cards, and I ended up winning for it. Not only was it extremely useful to play with, it was so fun. This is the one card that I'm like, okay, where are these locations at? Which one would work best to my advantage? This one card has almost like three different abilities now, depending on whatever your locations are on there. Like, okay, well, now I'm going to zap everybody with -3. Nope.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's actually pretty fitting with the character. He has multiple personalities, and each personality has a different power.
That's right.
I hadn't really thought of it till you put it that way, but in that regard, I mean, you never know what power he's going to have.
But yeah, I had a ton of fun with this card. I had a great time. I know that I used the bar with no name, I think twice in one day. And I could not like fathom what the person on the other end was thinking when I snapped turn 5 and we got he snapped and we're at 8 and I'm just sitting there and the only card that I had out there was something on a different location, and I just sat there and waited and watched this guy and then just laid out one card and won the game. So it's a great feeling. I mentioned on here that I did it with Rickety Bridge at one point, just mess with people. You sit there and you watch all these cards just get killed off. And then of course the Warrior Falls was fun too. I did that. I think I did that one today, where I Warrior Falls to everything, and I ended up having like one card that was just like one power above the other two that was on the board against me. And sure enough, I was able to kill him off, and he retreated shortly after that. But man, this was a fun card, and I don't think I regret my purchase. I think two of my most favorite cards were only 3,000, which is great. I love sitting there thinking about like the only fact that I only spent 3,000 tokens for each for Legion and Spider-Ham. Spider-Ham, I was sitting there thinking this morning, like, okay, where would I rank him? Legion is fun because he messes with the locations, and that's right up my alley. But Spider-Ham has made me smile so much when it comes to watching him pound the crap out of Null and just hit him with a hammer. And I'm like, yes, don't have to worry about Null this game. Thank goodness. But anyway, I'll step back. What are your thoughts here on Legion?
Well, I got him because, again, I hadn't built back up to 3,000 yet, but I got him on the Spotlight Cache.
Nice.
So yeah, I started tossing in some stuff. I want to say I pulled off the bar with no name once, but maybe I'm living vicariously through you. I have had Legion mess me over more times than I've had him help me. The other day I was playing and Project Pegasus came up on turn 3. And, I had Murder World was one of the earlier locations, and I wasn't doing anything with it. And so the guy played Legion on Murder World and cleared the whole board midway through.
Oh, jeez.
Another time I had the Abandoned Mine. I had Luke Cage on it and then 3 rocks. And I just kept playing because I had Infinite. So I'm like, well, I'll just hold off on turn 5, clear the mine, and then play Infinite.
Right.
And the guy played Legion on Monster Island. And so my rocks stayed, and I didn't get a monster there.
Oh, no. Oh, that sucks so bad.
Yeah, it's not a card. I don't know if you can build a deck around it, but I mean, yeah, if you keep your eyes peeled, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Do you use them with the Watcher?
No, I've thought about that, but no, I have not. I guess it would give you a little bit of an advantage to know what was coming, but I mean, I assume it has to get revealed anyway. Well, it'll be revealed anyway before you get a chance to play it.
And just help you plan ahead a little bit. I just like, the visual contrast of a guy with no hair and a guy with all the hair.
Right. And what's great about it is also like it opened up a whole like different way of winning and losing games.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many different locations that impact the game that it's great ways to kind of inventive ways to come up to try and win the game when you have Legion in your hands. So
it kind of goes along with some of the other cards where they're useful but not game breaking. I mean, Legion can totally change the tenor of a game, or he can also, you can have locations where it won't make a difference or where it'll hurt you more than it'll help you. So he's right. He has the potential to change things, but just the fact that he's in your deck doesn't really tilt it one way or the other.
Right.
So, I mean, in that respect, I think these are, pretty balanced cards, in terms of being useful and interesting, but not impacting the meta game a whole bunch.
Right. All right, let's move on to our locations last season. So our first location that got dropped was Lake Hellas. 1 cost cards have +2 power at that location. So I really only wrote one thing, which was I didn't hate it. It gave me an excuse during when that was the featured location that I was like, okay, here comes Shanna. Here comes Kathar. So I was billing. I was trying to do 1 cost decks. I was having a good time. I mean, I wasn't turning like everything into gold. That's for sure. I mean, or
Yeah.
I should, I definitely wasn't winning games over and over, but I was having a good time doing it. So I like Shanna. Shanna's she's like one of my favorite cards because it's kind of like, oh man, what am I going to get? I get 3 cards now. What am I going to get?
Shanna the She-Devil's like a box of chocolates, Jesse.
You never know what you're going to get. Yes, indeed. But anyway, didn't hate it. Had a good time when it was out there and gave me a reason to play a different type of deck. How about you?
Yeah. And it can be one that just, can, give you a little bit of an advantage one way or the other occasionally in a game without, throwing everything completely off. I did a lot of the same. I used my Savage Brands deck, which is
yes.
Shauna and Kazar and a lot of 1-cost cards. And then my Boosters Gold, which is Dazzler and Ultron and Patriot.
Nice.
So yeah, just looking at getting a lot of 1-cost cards out there and filling up the location. So yeah, it's a fun one. It has an effect, but doesn't throw everything off.
I didn't even think to use Ultron. I don't know why. And I'm really surprised I didn't have somebody do that to me. Like that would have been perfect. Like to Ultron and fill that thing up with with 1-cost drones, and then have Kazar and Mystique or Patriot. Yeah, right, dude. That'd been great. All right. Well, next up was the White Hot Room. First to fill this gets +3 max energy. And I remember last month when we were talking, we were kind of wondering, like, is it just to the end of the turn or is it going to be to the end of the game? And we find out pretty quickly that's to the end of the game. You get, if you can get that bonus, and wow, if that was a featured location, you're looking at Sunspot is probably going to be in your deck, and probably some other lower cost, if not the Brood's going to be in there to get that +3.
It kind of reminded me of the Sacred Timeline. I mean, sometimes it was definitely useful, but other times I was just like filling it up, and then like I'd forget about it. I said here, one of my opponents played Wave, and I played Spider-Man on turn 5, and I could have played 2 cards because I had 8 energy, but I'm like, well, no, I can only play 1.
Oh, I
just left 4 energy sitting on the table. I forgot that I had it.
Oh man, that's rough.
So actually, but there's a good one. If the White Hot Room is a featured location, again, put Wave in there, and you can play 2 cards when your opponent can probably only play 1.
That's true.
If you get that +3. I mean, there's different types of cards or locations. Like Pet Avengers Mansion is the lower tiered version of Avengers Mansion. So I put this one in the middle of the fill this location first. Well, I mean, Sacred Timeline, it can work. I've used it. I've had it help me once or twice, but that one's kind of the low end. The Raft, I think, is still the best one, because if you get that free 6-cost card and your opponent doesn't,
it's a swing
most of the time you've got a huge advantage.
Yeah.
Now, every once in a while, I still end up with something that I can't use.
Yeah, Giganto, and or
I've gotten null a few times without any destroying cards.
Yes.
Yeah, so but I mean, more often than not. So I put that one really makes a difference. I put the White Hot Room in the middle. It can be useful, but it's not make or break. It can definitely help.
Right. All right. To finish out our discussion here about last season, let's talk about some of either the popular decks or your favorite plays or anything that struck you during the gameplay of last season. And I'll kind of start here. Definitely noticed that destruction decks were on the rise. And again, that essentially shaped me to try and figure out counters to that all the time. I don't want to be I think the term was a destruction main, which I guess is like, okay, yeah, I'm just going to mainly play destruction. I don't want to be that guy that plays destruction because everybody else is playing destruction. I'm trying to figure out ways to get around it. Most likely what I was playing with is usually something that had armor in it, and I had Cosmo. Aside from that, I was seeing a lot more High Evolutionary than I was Galactus. Galactus was a big problem a couple seasons ago, and now I wasn't running into that very much at all, but High Evolutionary was definitely still out there. So usually if I was creating a deck, I had to have Luke Cage in there just so I didn't have to suffer Thing throwing stuff at me. And then I
play without Luke Cage.
Yeah, I think really, there are a lot of cards that he just essentially wipes out either abilities to Scorpion, yeah, locations as well. So he's extremely useful.
Yeah, low cost. I mean, again, like we were talking about with Echo, there's not a disadvantage to having him in your deck. It's just, I mean, yeah, it sucks if Rogue or Enchantress takes him away, but that doesn't happen too often. But yeah, there's times where he's just 2 points and that's it. But man, when Jotunheim or Negative Zone or Evolved Thing comes out, you're glad to have him.
Oh, for sure. I wrote down here, there were a couple times I was running into, I was more than a handful. I was running into a Spider-Man Storm, Professor X deck, lockdown deck, pretty much.
Was that before or after they tweaked Spider-Man?
It was after. He's still out there, and he's still being a pain in my butt. Like, they're still doing that. I saw that there is a Thanos lockdown deck out there, and it was like one of the... I don't know when they run these tournaments and how they run these tournaments either. I assume they probably run them kind of like just me and you have a game.
Yeah.
But a friendly battle, I assume. But anyway, I guess, there's a Thanos lockdown deck out there, and it is the best deck right now. So I did run into that a few times. You see the Infinity Gems and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, here comes Professor X. I did see that. I put down here, I use Spider-Ham a lot. Why not? If you could cancel out some big ability that's going to be happening, do it for 2 cost. And I can't remember, was it at the beginning of this season or the end of last? Well, I shouldn't say the beginning of the Rise of the Phoenix, where they essentially nerfed Spider-Ham a little bit by giving him. Okay.
Yeah, put him up to a 2. That was part of their anti-bounce deck strategy, which I'm not using Spider-Ham quite as much, but I don't really think it's because of that. I think I'm just trying other things. Because still at 2/2, he's totally worth it.
All right. So I wrote down here, currently the season hasn't ended yet. We got a few more days, but I'm at the mid 70s, and I've been there for a long time. I started making a comeback using my Shulkanaut deck. It was like all of a sudden nobody had an answer to that deck. And then, of course, I hit the 70s, and everybody's got an answer for that deck somehow.
The decks that I used last season, I had a bounce deck before I realized it was called a bounce deck. The changes they made didn't really stop it. I think I had to tweak it a little bit because Spider-Ham went up to a 2 cost. But I wasn't having much luck with that, or my I call it the Factor Trio deck, which is my Silver Surfer deck. But rather than call it Factor 3, which was a group of villains so obscure that I've never even read a comic with them. It's just from the old Marvel role-playing game I heard about them.
Oh, wow.
And then Trio, of course, the German group that was responsible for Da Da Da.
Oh, my. Okay. I know the song.
Yeah, you and Mark should do a Metal Hammer of Doom on that album.
Sure.
Yeah, if you ever want to hear a cover of Tutti Frutti in German.
Okay.
That is also really depressing.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, good times. Also, the only example I've ever heard of Irish-German techno folk.
Irish-German techno folk.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's something.
That's a genre.
Yeah. No, it's just one song. Tooraloo. Anyway, but none of those decks were working for me, so I started going back to like my Destroy deck, my Boosters deck. That got me almost to 90, and then it plunged back to 86 because everybody was hitting me with Killmonger.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, there's an algorithm. It knows. Go ahead.
But that's what bugged me is like, I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe Spider-Ham is too good for 1/1, but it's like, well, you just can't have a 1-cost card like that. I forget exactly what they said. I should have written it down, but it was something to the effect of like, oh, it's just, it just really derails entire decks. And I'm like, what does Killmonger do? Mm-hmm. Every flipping time.
Yep.
Granted, he's a 3/3, but I don't know. There was a while there that I just hated Killmonger. Mainly because outside of Michael B. Jordan, he's not that impactful a character. It's like what we were talking about last time with my problem with Patriot is not that Patriot's a bad character, but he shouldn't be better at Captain America's shtick in Snap than Captain America is.
Exactly.
Killmonger, outside of being played very well by Michael B. Jordan, should not have the clout he does in this game.
I agree. I agree.
I mean, even though they've tried to push him in the comics more because of Michael B. Jordan's performance, he doesn't stick in the comics.
You know who would have been?
Somebody else should have Killmonger's power.
Well, take Killmonger out, put Bullseye in his place.
There you go.
I mean, that would be a pretty. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty fitting.
I agree, because Bullseye is that would be perfect for Bullseye, and Killmonger can do something else. Or even Carnage. I mean, they're literally going with the literal interpretation of his name, I guess. But I know Killmonger from Christopher Priest's Black Panther run, and so that alone should make me feel fondly toward him. But I don't like him in Snap.
Don't like him.
He makes me angry, and I think he's more consistently disruptive than Spider-Ham has ever been.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't remember if it was in this deck or another one, but I put armor. I was getting smacked around by Killmonger so often that I put Armor and Cosmo in multiple decks where I wouldn't usually have them.
Yeah, exactly. I was doing the same thing against those Destroy decks.
Now, but the card that I saw, I don't have the statistics and the data to back this up, but I'd say the card that I saw increase in usage more than anything else this season was Magic.
Yeah.
When they dropped Magic from a 5 cost to a 3, I mean, she's in almost all my decks now, because why not?
Yeah.
And if I don't play her, my opponent does usually.
Yeah, I was going to say, somebody had mentioned that they were like, well, I don't put Magic in my deck anymore because I know my opponent's going to have them. So I'm going to get turn 7 anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost weird to me now when I'm like, wait, no turn 7?
Uh-huh.
Which is odd, considering there have been a couple games early on where I was like, oh, wait, there's a turn 7. Sometimes I was the one who played Magic, and I'm like, why isn't the game over?
Yeah.
We're having a theme emerging of me not being very observant. But first of all, I think she's now the premier location destroyer.
True. I
still see a lot of Storm, but Scarlet Witch is random, and Rhino's predictable, but why not give yourself an extra turn?
Yeah.
And then Storm, Storm definitely has her uses, but I'd say Magic's head and shoulders above all of them.
I agree.
Impromptu listing, I'd put Magic 1, Storm 2, Scarlet Witch 3, because she can really throw a wild card in there, and then Rhino, not bad at all, but just, you know exactly what you're going to get. You're just going to have a neutral location.
Mm-hmm.
Scarlet Witch can come back to bite you, but she can also, I know I had one game, I think, where I was losing and I played her and I turned the location into the bar with no name and won. Can't predict it, though, but
nope.
So, but yeah, seen a lot of Magic, seen a lot of Limbo getting countered more. I've had been like, okay, and I'm going to do this on turn 7, and then, oh crap, there's no turn 7. Legion is particularly good at that.
Legion, that's right.
Yeah. The other one whose adjustment I thought made a big difference, at least in my usage of it, and I did see him more often, is Living Tribunal.
Yes, that needed to happen. That buff needed to happen.
I've been using him a lot now. I even put him into my move deck, because those cards, if things go the right way, can get pretty high powered.
That's
and
true.
So I actually put him in that one, and been using him a lot. And I thought at one point, I'm like, oh, him and Iron Man, that would work well. And then somebody played Iron Man Living Tribunal Onslaught on me.
Mm-hmm.
So that I immediately made that deck.
Yeah.
Don't always get it to work. But yeah, he's not overpowering now, but he's a lot more. I'd said before when we talked about, we both got him for 6,000, and I said he's probably worth 3,000. Now I'm going to say he's definitely worth 3,000. Yeah, I usually like to play Living Tribunal last, because I feel like if they know that's what you're doing, then they can,
if they got something,
they can abandon a location,
right?
They can just concentrate on building it up. Whereas if you've got him coming, I usually try to look. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to lose this location, but I if I can just edge him out on one of the other two, and then I take the third one, then we're in good shape. So I usually try to keep him till the very end.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. And
it's worked so well that I'm still in the 80s, where I've been the whole time. And like I said, the only reason I'm even that high is because I started high enough. Like if I hadn't started there, I don't even know if I'd be in 70 right now. So, but yeah, I went back to a lot of the old standbys, mainly move and destroy. Although I threw some others. I threw some newer cards in, or tried a few different things, but it was mainly those others. Played a lot of Null and Venom.
Oh yeah, classics.
Yeah,
Classics.
so because that was the only thing that was getting me to move anywhere.
Got you. Well, all right, let's move into our next section here. It's Conquest, which was a game mode that dropped, I think, last season, not this season, but last season. And still haven't played a whole lot. I don't think I think I played it that one game, and then that was it. I didn't play after that. So what about you?
Somehow I got one Infinity ticket left. But yeah, I don't know. I should probably play it more, just because I keep going like, oh, I'm not gonna play Conquest. I'm just gonna play 1 or 2 games, and I keep playing, and I'm like, well, I should have done Conquest and seen if I could have gotten something else. But yeah, I'm about halfway through. I know last time it was abbreviated, so they brought it in partway through the season, and I got I got the variant, and I'm not gonna hit that this season. Okay. Which is okay. I don't need French Revolution, Les Miserables, Mr. Sinister. It can be interesting. As a friend of mine pointed out, that's actually where you can test out decks, because you just go to the proving grounds. Maybe you get a ticket, maybe you won't, but it doesn't affect your ranking.
Oh yeah.
And never even occurred to me.
I need to start making use of that then. That'd be nice.
Yeah, that's where you can test stuff out. So
smart. Thanks a lot for joining us. Make sure to tune in tomorrow for the next installment of Snap Material.